Welcome again. Here we are. We get to hear some writers read. I've learned not to say readers write. And here today we have Jane Piehl and Gussie Howe. But before that, you know the routine. You're going to say the poem with me. Are you ready? Write, write, write.
Right, right, right.
Until you get it right.
Until you get it right.
Then read aloud.
Then read it aloud.
You'll draw a crowd.
And draw a crowd.
And bring us great delight.
And bring us great delight.
And this is delightful to have you, Jane and Gussie, here today. Tell us a little bit about your connection so we know what's happening.
All right. Gussie was a neighbor of ours and lived across the street in Laurelhurst. She happened to take our, first of all, I will say we had 4 children. We had a boy and 3 girls, Caroline, Ann, and Janet. Eric had a paper route and he would go to Gussie's house, and a half hour later he would leave because he delivered his papers in the morning, and he was delighted to have anybody who would talk to him. So, and then Gussie also came in and talked to my husband Dwayne, who at that point was paralyzed from the neck down with multiple sclerosis, but from the neck up, he was sharp as a tack.
Yep.
So, and much to my delight, she is here with me in Horizon House.
Yeah.
So take it away.
Okay, and Jane's husband Dwayne, at a critical time in my life, was like my personal advisor, and that was nice both ways, because it was nice for him being paralyzed from the neck down to be my advisor, and you know, very nice for me. Anyway, skipping up to where we are now, Jane's daughter Anne wrote a poem about her dad, and it was nominated. He was nominated and won the winning local nomination for the Society of Multiple Sclerosis Man of the Year. And so the family went to the White House to Washington D.C. All expenses paid, and her recollection that the most vivid is the mechanics of getting her husband to Washington, D.C. We're talking about getting on the plane, going down the aisle, the whole 9 yards. And we took only one wheelchair, the big one that had a reclining back and came apart for travel. We also took the transfer board to help slide him in and out of the car or airplane seats. He had to be transferred on the driver's side. We used the airport narrow chair to get him on and off the aircraft. There were other devices to take, plus medications, his gray suit, and comfortable but presentable clothes. Did you get the whole shirt, or did you just do the front part? I can't remember. For his presentable shirt and tie.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He had a wonderful tie. I'd gone to Frederick and Nelson and bought him a suit to go.
There were other devices to take, plus medications and so on. I don't remember how we got to and from Seattle Airport, but ground transportation in D.C. was all by cab to and from Dulles Airport. It was a very long ride for him. On the flight to D.C., he sat in the coach in the bulkhead seat. On the way home, the flight attendant took pity on us and moved us to first class. The girls were quite jealous. Thankfully, the embassy suites was fully air-conditioned, blah, blah. Let's see, where am I supposed to read? It's a good thing that this is not on ABC or something. Do you remember where I'm supposed to go on?
Is it a little puzzling, Gussie? Do you need Jane to tell you what the
Yes,
next?
where's the next thing you want me to read?
Oh, you just keep going.
Just keep going.
Okay.
Just keep going.
Just
Okay.
read.
The
Just
only-
read.
Just read.
The driver was, the only seat that we could transfer it to was the passenger seat next to the driver. The driver was using this seat as a desk and was not amused when he had to move all his stuff. Dwayne was loaded in, and the children began to collapse his wheelchair for the trip. The only problem was that the back trunk was full of so much stuff that there was no room for the wheelchair without a complete unloading and repacking. The driver was not amused. Then there were people. The limo has a second door and seat. We sat, the mother of the year and her son, one person from the MS Society, and Janet on a jump seat holding up her father's head from behind. The back seat, when everything isn't working, you can't hold your head up yourself. In the back seat, there was me, Eric, Caroline, and another person from the MS Society, and Ann sitting on the bump on the floor. It was hot, but we soon got on the 5 or so blocks to the White House gate, where one of our MS escorts presented whatever it was that we needed to go through the gate. The limo stopped at the entrance to the reception area for the Oval Office. 2 Marines in full dress were at the entrance door. They saluted us and remained in full salute while we unloaded, assembled the wheelchair, transferred Dwayne into the chair, and tried to look calm and collected as the 10 of us entered the White House. Fortunately, we had to wait a few minutes in the air conditioning before we entered the Oval Office. The 6 of us entered the Oval Office along with the mother of the year and her son. Pictures were taken with the president, the whole reason for our being there. And some informal chit-chat started until Dwayne took over the whole interview. He knew, but the rest of us did not know, that Reagan had gotten his college degree from a small college in Illinois, and that he had majored in economics. So Dwayne says that he knows that Reagan majored in economics and that his daughter is majoring in economics at Harvard. He then proceeded to tell a joke. 3 men walk into a bar, an economist, somebody else, and a third someone else, etc., etc. We all laugh. The president gives each family a jar of jelly beans with the presidential seal on the outside. We all laugh, and then we leave in good spirits. 1 up for the man in the gray flannel suit. The limo was not at the door when we left the building, so we joined some reporters and others in the traffic circle outside. A young Andrea Mitchell decided to interview us on camera. Apparently, Janet has the tape. The limo finally arrived to take us back to the hotel. However, only 8 of us returned, and we easily loaded up, far from the eyes of the Marine guards. Back at the hotel, Dwayne absolutely collapsed in bed after his suit was removed. His dress was now casual, and the room was air-conditioned. The rest of the day was ours. The children brought us some lunch, and then we headed out to explore the town. They found a way to celebrate Eric's 25th birthday. That, however, is their story. Want me going?
I think that are you at the end yet?
No, Slade Gordon.
Oh, we had to go see Slade Gordon.
We'll do Slade Gordon.
He was this, senator.
Keep reading.
Keep reading.
The next day we headed to Capitol Hill to see Senator Slade Gordon.
There you go.
He was very gracious but not too pleased because Sally Ride, the first woman in space, was addressing the Senate at the same time as we were there.
Oh.
The MS Society got their photograph. Senator Gordon went back to the Senate, and we left for Dulles Airport to catch the afternoon flight back to Seattle. Maybe that's about.
Yeah, is Lila McKee's?
Oh yeah, maybe the best part of the trip was the welcome home party that Lila McKee organized from all the neighbors. It was a red, white, and blue parade, right, around the island on 43rd Avenue Northeast. We had a, what do you call it, a green place in the middle of the street, so you
Yeah.
had a lot, like a private park.
Yeah.
It was red, white, and blue parade around the island on 43rd Avenue. And all the neighbors came carrying the flags. It was fabulous, walking or marching, riding bikes or trikes, skating or skateboarding, or pushing a wheelchair. Welcome home.
That's it.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. That is now, Jane, did you want Gussie to read some more, or was that?
No, that was it. It was
That's an
just,
adventure beyond belief. So
They
thank you
were-
so much.
the Piehls were very, very important neighbors. They were good friends, but Dwayne, paralyzed from the neck down, I kind of hung on him because I was a kind of a critical point in my life, you know, divorce, violence, domestic violence, the whole 9 yards, and a lot of trauma. And he gave me some very good advice, and I kind of hung on him. So it was a mutual,
Yeah.
very
So
nice
very,
mutual
very
thing.
nice. Thanks
Yeah.
for sharing, and
Yeah.
thank you
Yeah,
so much, Jane.
I wrote another short thing later on, just of visitors to Dwayne's office, of which Gussie was one.
Is she reading that today?
No, that's enough.
Okay.
That's enough, but I do have to tell you that one time I brought a piece of pie, because I had made a pie. It was cherry pie. And I brought it over, and, you know, I could feed it to Dwayne, and then Jane didn't have to do it, because, you know, he couldn't do anything. And Dwayne made a very poor decision. He said, Jane, you should get the recipe for this pie. Jane about took his head off, and I was so
Anyway.
Oh. Gussie, before you go, close the book and hold it up and just show it to the camera so that people see that this is Jane's writing in a 3-ring binder, and it covers what years, Jane? Where do you start with your story?
2016.
I start before I was born.
That's right. That's what's incredible about this 3-ring binder.
Yeah.
And I think also that I've been in a writers group, I guess, for 30 years. Never took a course in college in writing, but if you write stories or you tell stories, it's less intimidating and it's more interesting.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Let's give another round of applause. Thank you. Our next reader, is Bob Anderson, and I have his book in my hand, and I have handled your book a number of times in the library on the windowsill collection, and I have read the title of it so many times, and I'm going to read the title to you. You've got to hear this title. Boeing Flight Test Instrumentation B-52 to 777. Robert B. Anderson, author, Flight Test Project, Instrumentation Engineer. Let's hear a round of applause for that. Welcome, welcome, Bob.
Thank you.
We're glad you're here.
What do I say?
You say, whatever you'd like to say, Bob.
Well,
tell us about the plane.
This is the 367-80, and the book I wrote describes how flight test operates and the work that goes into it. We fly an airplane, a test airplane, every day, 7 days a week during the certification programs. And there are many different programs, 5, and each airplane has its own crew. And this one was the first jet, American jet, and it was the 707 first one, I guess the prototype for that. And as you can see, it's a pretty little plane. I flew on it for about 4 years. And I'll start reading, I guess, because that's what I came here for. Preface. The return of the 767-80 to Boeing Field from storage in the Arizona desert set off the chain reaction that produced this document. A request appeared in the Boeing News the following week for -80 stories. I noticed the appeal when it was appeared and did nothing as time passed. One day I began to list -80 events, but had forgotten where they were to be sent. Meanwhile, the list had grown to include all of my flight test experiences, and I came to realize that I had been fortunate enough to work with the Boeing commercial jets on the leading edge of the commercial jet age in this country. I worked for Union Carbide before that, and the Union Carbide section in this is included since that was the beginning of my instrumentation career. The events in this document are my own experience with a few exceptions which are identified as such. The exceptions were described to me by the principal characters and are included for the pleasure of the reader. One of them I questioned, but I heard it from 2 sources, so I put it in there. This book is basically a history of Boeing flight test operations from the view of the personnel working the test aircraft on the flight line during the test flights. It is seen through the eyes of a project instrumentation engineer. It began in 1957 with the follow-on tests of the B-52, 01, 002, 03, 08, and 367-80. The 707s were certified at the beginning of this period, but I did not work on them, only on the B-52, 002, and the 367-80. It ends with the 777. This book is dedicated to my wife, Betty. Hold up your hand. Who patiently heard most of these stories many times and still proofed the results. She heard a couple of them again this morning. I don't know where to start on this. I wasn't quite sure who we were going to do, but thought I'd tell you about 2 or 3 of the things that happened. The way this is written, this is a picture of what it takes to get a plane in the air every day. This part over here is the paper that we use to get the planes in the air. This is flying. Boeing flies airplanes. Boeing Field, the double aisle planes are made and flown at Everett. The single aisles are out of Renton. We test at Edwards Air Force Base. We test in Roswell, New Mexico. And we have planes sometimes flying in all of those places at the same time. And they're all held by a flight test crew, which is chosen just for that airplane and follows that airplane wherever it goes. When they're going to flight test an airplane or send it to flight test, I better look at this so I'll know what I'm talking about. The BCA project people, those are the people that build the or design the airplane. They send a EWA to our analysis people. Our analysis people send a tip sheet to the test operations people, which tell them what they want to do, and they send an FTIR to Flight Test Project. Flight Test Project sends us an FTIR, and that is, we get a few hundred of those, sometimes thousands. And they describe the data that they want to see, and our job is to design the equipment that goes on the airplane that gets the data. And let's see, sometimes the things are funny, sometimes they are not funny, but this book is basically 2 parts. The first part describes the paperwork that is used for all of this and the interaction between the groups. The second part is just things that happen.
Okay.
And I'll start, I guess, with things that happen, and I'll go with this airplane. I'm nervous, so bear with me. Here we go.
There it is.
This is called the 727 engine. one of the things that we got when we built the Dash 80, we used it to test other airplanes on. And one of the things, Boeing was building the 727, and they didn't know what to do with the engines. So they decided they'd put an engine on the airplane, so they put it on here, on this side, and the exhaust shot straight into the rudder or the elevator. So we built a duct that went up over top of the elevator, and a cargo door is right here on the airplane, and the engine was right in the center of the cargo door, so they built a bulkhead inside the airplane to stiffen it up so it would take the loads. This airplane has a door up here, a door back here, not anymore because the door is in the middle, the engine is in the middle of it, and the entry to this airplane, for all practical purposes, a little hatch right down here where we went in. This airplane actually had a key for the door, and we were working in Virginia one time, and they locked the airplane, and we'd get up in the morning and head down for the airplane, and nobody brought to bring the key. So at least one day a week, somebody would have to walk back up and get the key to unlock the airplane. And all we had was mosquitoes at the time. When they wanted to test this engine, they put it on the side of the airplane, and I'll just start reading. During the period while the 707 certification testing was in full sway, many 727 configurations were being tested on the Dash 80. One of the first items was the engine. The location that was considered to be potentially the most troublesome was position number 1. 1 was here, 2 was here in the middle, and 3 was on the back, on the other side. The left side mounted engine was chosen. Of course, the location where the engine was to be mounted was in the center of the cargo door. No problem, install a bulkhead. This was done. You may say that the engine exhausts directly on the leading edge of the horizontal stabilizer. Again, attach a S tailpipe. Done. Now define the installation, the requirements for the test instrumentation. Done. But there were a few problems. All pilots' panels and flight test engineering instrumentation are grouped in 4s for 4-engine airplanes and 3s for 3-engine airplanes. Every engine has temperatures, pressures, and everything, and they're all grouped together. And you can look at the spread on the instrumentation, and you will see 4, 4, 3 like that. So if one is bad, it'll be quite obvious. Anyway, let's see. Where do you put the 5th engine gauges? Room was found and cockpit instruments installed. Instrumentation had a similar problem, but the one that was not solved as easily, or maybe even more easily, depending on the point of view. We were using a new, for the Dash 80 data system, PDM tape. Rack installation on this airplane was a problem since we did not have usable seat tracks for the equipment racks in critical areas, and were limited to the number of racks that could be installed. Let me see where we go. Okay. We had reached the limit when we installed the new data system, and no additions were possible. That meant that the 5th engine data equipment had to be installed where the room existed, not grouped by track or function. Convention and data reduction considerations placed encoders on one track, engine pressures on another track, engine RPMs on another track, and so on. Our data tracks were directly related to a rack due to time consideration, and rewiring the instrument systems was not an option. We did our best. All configuration sheets were filled out by hand and delivered to via Linscomb, the overseer of configuration control, who, and noticeably short-tempered where changes were concerned. The changes were made and delivered. I waited for the phone to ring. It did. And what in the hell are you doing to us? Can't you read? Don't you know that tracks encoders are located on? And etc., with imagination and vigor for about 2 minutes. Let's see, no, me. we are tied to the wiring on the racks and the time available, and there's no way in this blue-eyed world that we can group the instruments on the proper tracks. This is the best we can do. My God, do you know how much extra work this is going to make for me? Me, can you do it? Hell yes, I can do it. Me, well, if it means extra work for you or extra work for me, you lose. I waited for the explosion. I heard a snort and something like engineers, and then laughter. Luckily, she had a sense of humor. It was just during this period when the instrumentation had been added to the flight, crew, instrumentation engineer, I believe, because test stops did not want to change the data tapes. We had been the recipients of PDM prototype data monitor. The 707s had good monitors. We got what was left over. We were glad to get it. The prototype monitor was originally designed using vacuum tubes. When the designer changed jobs, Emery Rock completed the unit using transistors. Transistors were just brand spanking new in those days. The production units were all transistors, thanks to Emery, but time consideration locked the prototype unit into the hybrid configuration. We didn't care. It was great just to have a system on board which allows you to view a single data channel and actually read the values accurately, which worked most of the time. The horizontal oscillator which drove the system was mounted on the floor beside the rack. It was about 18 inches square and 10 inches high. It failed at least once a month. Who cared? We had a spare. My first flight as a crew member came with the fifth engine installed and operating. We did not take off with the engine operating. Takeoff was accomplished with the conventional 4 engines, and then the fifth engine started at altitude. There was usually a bang, a whine, the airplane slewed sideways until the pilot retrimmed it. The instrumentation station was at the rear of the airplane, around 10 feet forward of the fifth engine inlet. About halfway through the test that day, there was suddenly a series of explosions, ending in a brrrrang, something like a machine gun firing. I leaped to my feet, groped for my parachute, and wondered what to do, what was falling off. Luckily, I was at the rear of the airplane and could not be seen from the cockpit, for no one in the forward contingent showed any concern. This was my introduction to surges. It's different when the engine is out on a wing and when it only is 10 feet from your ear. Grab your station. Okay.
Oh, Bob, this is wonderful. This is wonderful.
This one is called Checkerboard Square, and you are going to like this one. The north side of the flight test hangar is painted an alternate orange and white design. It was not always that way. At the start of the 707 test program, that particular side of the hangar was gray, same as the rest of the buildings. If you've all driven south on 99, and you look at the Boeing hangar, you will see that whole end of the hangar is a checkerboard square, what was Purina's trademark in those days. Part of the purchase price for the 707s was a crew training package. The airline sent their pilots to Boeing for training on a scheduled basis. Aircraft availability for training purposes eventually came to be a problem which Boeing had to solve. More about this in another section. However, airline crews were like everything else. You get all kinds in the mix. The instrumentation offices were in the northwestern low bay of the hangar. East of the hangar is the apron with the blast fences for engine runs, some grass and taxi strips, more grass, and then the main 10,000-foot runway complete with lights. One foggy morning, we were at work in the low bay engineering area doing what we do, and gradually the sound of an approaching airplane began to intrude on the collective consciousness in the group. The engine roar became louder and louder and louder until all work had stopped, and we were looking at each other wondering just exactly what the hell was happening. There was a final accelerated roar, and then the sounds diminished. A few comments were made, everybody resumed work. Later that day, we found that a crew training 707 landing in the fog and mistaken the gray end of the hangar for the runway, lined up on the hangar and almost landed through the north end of the hangar. In the next few days, I recall, not next week, the painters arrived and painted the current design on the north end of the hangar. It was known as Checkerboard Square after the Purina advertisement. The only change in the last 30 years has been the color of the shade of orange. During my sojourn at the University of Washington, I was working second shift at the university at Boeing at the time. One of my classmates was a tower operator, so he was acquainted with the crew, or I was acquainted with the crew. I called him the day following the near miss. He said they heard the noise, located the airplane through the antenna on the roof, and realizing there was no place to run, and no place to run to, all immediately hit the floor of the tower. Anybody looking up was treated to a worm's eye view of the undercarriage of a 707. It was a very close call for all concerned.
Oh.
Let's see. Another thing that we did was auto land. This was when the Boeing, not Boeing, but the Seattle Center was being built, and they were putting up the Space Needle.
Space Needle. Oh, my.
The Renton engineers were developing the first auto-land system for the Dash 80, which involved the installation of a new computer on the airplane. The computer would lock on the glide slope, which is a vertical angle, and the localizer, a horizontal angle. So we'd have one going this way and one going this way, and the autopilot would lock onto that. And the computer corrected the airplane pitch path up and down, left and right, with the help of a radar altimeter flare, which when the plane landed, it came in this way, then it flared at 25 feet like this, and cut the engines, and it would drop and land. And the rear wheels always hit first, because if it goes down on the nose gear breaks off and you have problems. So anyway, there it was. The Seattle World's Fair was being built that summer. I spent days flying past the Space Needle while it was under construction, watching the progress on an average of about 15 or 17 times a day. We landed north to south. I was intimately acquainted with the area between the Spokane Street Bridge through Georgetown from an altitude of about 50 feet at sea. It was considerably higher than that, but it seemed like 50 feet. The analysis engineer wanted an idea of our altitude in the approach, whether we touched down or not. This measurement was recorded on our oscillograph. CEC had developed a system using an oscillograph magazine that printed on the record as it was being recorded. This was the first of its kind, and it used a liquid developer and a heated platinum inside the magazine to accomplish the feat. It had a few drawbacks. The fluid was prone to run to the ends of the magazine during the banks, leaving one side underdeveloped. Then the beast weighed about 30 pounds, and all of us had to bore burn scars on our arms from changing the magazine during flight when it was hot. Developer feeder slot also had a tendency to clog with extended use. All in all, it was really a great system, but it wasn't a great system, but it was the best that we had. Tom Hibben used one of those at Edwards Air Force Base on a remote program. He was watching the tracers during a landing, and he noticed a strange phenomena. Wire was being extruded from the exit path along with the paper. He watched in horrified fascination as the machine proceeded to cut itself up. A pall of smoke accompanied by a burning odor signaled the successful completion of the task, and the test was postponed until Tom could take the unit to the manufacturer in Pasadena. The landing part of the program was rather sporty. Usually you were chest to magazine with the oscillograph, feet braced aft, with their attitude divided between what was happening in the galvanometer trace and what was happening outside. One of the few windows on the airplane was located by the oscillograph, making this possible. The Dash 80 had 12 windows scattered all over the airplane. Many times you saw only the grass dividing the runway from the taxi strip. Many times you saw the taxi strip. Many times you saw the edge of the runway. The last was good. The first two were not so good. We only touched down about half the time. Two of our touchdowns were memorable. They occurred on the same day in adjacent landings. Luckily, I was seated at the Brown recorder over the landing gear for that time. The airplane normally flared at about 25 feet. The engines were cut and we dropped down. On this particular approach, the 25-foot mark level were reached and we pitched nose down, not nose up. I have never hit the ground harder on any flight since or before that, including rate of sync testing. My headset flew off and I caught it on its way down, and my neck hurt for several hours after. Luckily, the pilot somehow got the nose up before we hit, or God knows what might have happened, because we did not hit on the nose gear, but only on the mains. We bounced, and I still is my impression that we only hit once and were airborne on the bounce. Throttles firewalled and the engines were howling. We went around for the next attempt. There wasn't a word said, incidentally, over the interphone all the way around after that happened. I have only had 2 landings. Yeah, okay. We went around for the next attempt, and that was the second memorable landing. I have had only 2 landings where it was impossible to feel the transition between air and ground until we started hitting the tar strip. It goes click, click, click then. But then the pilot was in control. It happened again on RA 001, but with the pilot in the control of the airplane. The 2 extremes in autopilot control landings are back-to-back approaches. That's something that's unusual. And let's see. I think that's enough.
Do you think that's enough, Bob? I'm holding my breath, hoping we're going to land all right. That was a gift. I'm a word person, and you've enriched my vocabulary here into a new set of words that has to do with airplanes.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's hear amazing Bob. Thank you so much. And we will tune back together in a week's time for some more writers' reading.
Okay.
Thanks very much. Oh, Bob, that